Welcome back to my channel. A few weeks ago, somebody asked if I would do the swatching sheets like I did in the palette video, but instead of doing all the colors together, I would organize them by pigment number and do each pigment family individually. So this week, we're going to start with PY. I have, I believe if I've counted correctly, 26 different PY pigments in my palette. So either unique pigments or variations of a pigment. A lot of them are PY43s. I have PY43, which is yellow ochre from a whole bunch of different brands. And so I am going to fill out this sheet with the pigment number, the brand, and the color name, and then we're going to swatch them all. So there we go. The page is all labeled. My pen died halfway through, so the color that I use to label changes, but I think this should be a pretty simple process. So let's start with the first color, which is Buttercup. There's the water. Let's grab a brush. And then we have lemon yellow. What's this? What are you next to? You're next to Buzzy Bee. You are not next to Hansa. There's Hansa. Overall, my yellow collection of yellow pigments is a lot bigger than like my yellow line. Next up is Cadmium Yellow Hue. I believe is this. Is this? My goal was to not take all my pans out. So I'm gonna try and do this just from like the tops of pans. Next we have Daisy Lou, which is it's in this tray. Scooch that a little bit so that I can scooch this onto the table. Daisy Lou is let's do that. Just no. It's not Daisy Lou that I just put my brush into. What was that? It was. Oh, I just can't read. So put my finger into wet paint. Next is Jasper Stardust, Cadmium Yellow Deep, which is right here and is actually, I think, probably going to need to sit for a minute or two, but maybe it won't. I actually decided to just work. I would say that it almost seems lighter than the medium. that's next to it. Like the medium seems more orange than the deep, but I am not. I was about to say I'm not an expert. At this point, I'd say I've got a pretty extensive palette. This is yellow ochre, but it's PY42 instead of 43. And this Holbein version is the only version that's the 42 that I have in my palette. There's just no good place to put this water container. Is that the only Holbein color I have? Yes. Cool. Holbein gets to go away. Winsor Newton Yellow Ochre is... I just saw it. Because it's ugly. Because I poured it myself. I want to say this is it. What is it? Yellow ochre, there isn't a huge difference between brands, I find. The Winsor Newton one just happens to be my favorite for mixing. There is some difference in like handmade ones when it comes to granulation, but that's really the only difference I found. Here's the Michael Wilcox one, which is another PY43. This tray to my lap. We have Butternut, which is the Cosmic Creations version of PY43. Again, every brand has their own version, and they're all just like slightly different in their tone and their consistency because every formula is different. Tuscan Sun is the Artistic Isle version of PY43. I went through a phase in 2022 where PY43 was one of those favorite pigments, and so I have a bunch of them from different brands. Tuscan Sun is probably the brightest one I've got in my palette. And now I'm being very careful not to touch the letters because from this point onwards my writing is not waterproof. Yellow Ochre Light. Oh, it's the ugly one. It's the one I've poured really badly. Or just ochre light. Yeah, I poured this pan really badly. My tube was really cold while I was trying to pour it. I would say it's not light. Like there's not enough of a difference for me to call it a light. It's not like this where the regular one is so orange compared to the deep version. And then Cooper. Honestly, that's Cooper. It is. Normally I'd try to have the palettes in this all as well. There simply isn't space with how big these trays are, and I wasn't going to pull out all of these colors. For some of the smaller ones I might, but for some of these palettes there are like almost 50 colors that need to be pulled out, and that isn't really super doable. Nickel Titanate Yellow. It's in this full pan because my tube exploded everywhere. And so it got an upgrade to a bigger pan. It is one of the newer yellows to my palette, and I do really love it. It's quite opaque, but it is quite pretty. Szmal's Lemon Yellow. This. Clearly I like it. It's got a pretty sizable divot in the middle of the pan. Buzzy Bee is Cosmic Creations PY74, and I have already been through an entire pan. There's my original pan of it. It's pretty much empty. Like, I might be able to get a tiny bit with a brush, but most of that that's left is just staining. It is by far my favorite yellow, and I almost always reach for it when I need a yellow. So I have a brand new pan of it. Beam Fall Poplar Yellow is in this round palette, which is also a PY74. It is one of those yellow pigments that not a lot of commercial brands make as their yellow, but is like, if you want a primary yellow, is definitely my favorite primary yellow. Like, there are other yellows that are really pretty. Lemon Yellow by Szmal is one of those yellows that is really pretty that I enjoy. This is what it is. Yellow Orange by Schmincke is up next. It is PY110. I wanted this to be more orange than it was. Like, there are ways to tone it, but I was hoping for just like a good ready to go orange in my palette. It very much reminds me of a cadmium orange, except transparent, not opaque. Sort of got the same feeling of Daisy Lou, except it's transparent. Oh, I just saw this when I was putting away the palette earlier. Is this it? It is. It is. What you'll find with a lot of my primary colors is that they're also white nights, because when I was originally building my palette back in 2020, white nights was the most affordable way to add professional colors to a palette, and I don't feel the need to get rid of paints that work well. Will I slowly start adding other brands so that I can use other brands instead of White Nights paints for mixing videos? Yes. For the moment though, they're simply the colors that I have, and so lots of those like base colors in the single pigments are going to be White Nights colors, simply because when I was building my professional palette, they were what I could afford. From Szmal's Nickle Azo Yellow. I believe this one. It is. Which looks so brown in its pan and is not as brown on paper. Like, it's still almost, I was gonna say, it almost reminds me of a Quinn Gold, and then went, oh yeah, it's PY150, it's part of Quinn Gold. This is one of the colors that makes up Quinn Gold. It was not a part of my palette until the Quinn Gold video. I love having it as part of my palette, but it did become part of my palette because of the Quinn Gold video, which is sort of a fun part about the videos, is that it has introduced me to a bunch of the single pigment colors that I wouldn't typically add to my palette. Daniel Smith Azo Yellow, another color that I believe was added to my palette because of a video. Not a yellow that I had in my palette. I will say that yellows and browns for a very long time were colors that I just didn't care about adding to my palette. I didn't use them enough to justify having a whole bunch of different variations. I tended to stick with my tried and true favorites and didn't like to explore other color variations. In the past 2 years though, I have really expanded my browns collection into lots of fun granulating ones and have added a lot more single pigment yellows to my palette for doing things like the mixing videos. Permanent Yellow Medium by Cause Paints is PY154. It is often the yellow that I travel with. It's in a full pan. I don't feel like I have to be precious with it because it's in a full pan and it's always part of her line. And it, to me, feels like a good sort of like neutral yellow. Like, it's yellow. It knows what its purpose is. It's not too warm. It's not too cool. It's just yellow. Lemon Yellow Deep by Winsor & Newton is, yes you are, I'm actually gonna wet these two because I know they're like, so the first one is Lemon Yellow Deep, and then the second one is Volcano Yellow. And if I was smart, I would have added an extra space and swatched them on the same line beside each other, but I did not, and so we're just gonna have to deal with the fact that you're not seeing them side by side. I will say I prefer the Winsor & Newton version of this pigment to the Schmincke version. Both are PY 159. In Schmincke, it is Volcano Yellow. In Winsor & Newton, it is Lemon Yellow Deep, and it's just part of their normal day-to-day line. I find the Winsor & Newton version far easier to activate. It's got a nicer texture to it, and I just prefer it. Oh, you activate on camera. Look at you. Naples Yellow Light. That. You are that. And then Naples Orange. So Naples Yellow Light is 216. It's just a pretty pale yellow. But Naples Orange is also 216, and I happen to remember that it is very orange. That's not it. That's it. So Naples Orange is very orange. It's actually sort of at the end of my section of oranges down here, and it is orange, but it is technically PY 216. It is quite an opaque color. All of the versions are quite opaque, but that is all of the PY pigments that I've got in my palette. I would say that I do have favorites. I definitely prefer Permanent Yellow Medium, Lemon Yellow by Roman. I'll find that later, by Roman Szmal, and Buzzy Bee. I love Yellow Ochres, and just whichever one I pick sort of depends on my mood during the day. Cooper does have far more texture than Yellow Ochre by Winsor & Newton, but it's all about sort of what you're looking for. So I hope you enjoyed seeing the yellows that are swatched in my palette. If you did, please like and subscribe, and let me know which yellow pigment is your favorite. Do you have a favorite yellow pigment that I didn't swatch out or don't have in my palette? Because there are, on occasion, pigments that I just don't have in my palette until somebody brings them up for a video, and I realize that actually I do like that color. I've just like sort of overlooked it when shopping online, because I do most of my paint shopping on a screen, and so I am at the whim of whatever the photographer has taken pictures of. So let me know what your favorite yellow pigment is, and thanks for watching.